Docherty-Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can congratulate the honourable gentleman on his speech. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to Brexit, I think since 2016, everyone in this place has probably had their tuppence worth to say on the floor of this Parliament. At that time, its most extraordinary statements have been made. Some beginning of the debate on the side of a bus, or as some of us would notice it, as a coach, where I come from. It seems that some folk in this debate don't know the difference between a bus and a coach, probably never been on a public bus in their life. And also, we've had former Brexit Secretary who said on the floor of the House that the industrial working class voted for Brexit. Well, Mr. Speaker, firstly, my constituents rejected the proposition on the side of the bus stroke coach. And also, as I said to the then Brexit Secretary on that very day, as I remember, that the industrial working class of Western Bartonshire voted overwhelmingly to remain within the European Union. And not only did they reject Brexit, but they also voted, surprisingly to his knowledge, for Scotland to once again become an independent, sovereign nation. And I mention that because it was a referendum process back in 2014 where we discussed for over 2 years our place in the world, and we were told that the only way to remain in the European Union was indeed to remain within the United Kingdom. Well, there you go. That's another lie for everyone to see. It would also seem, that this is a government which has, in relation to Brexit, as we would say in some parts of these islands, has dinghied Scotland. It is a government full of dunderheads and indeed clipes. Now, for Hansard, I would advise them to get themselves a good Scots dictionary they've had since 2015 to get used to the very idea. Mr. Speaker, ministers of this government seem to approach the issue and bring it to the dispatch box, and they seem merely to haver about Brexit, and unable to articulate a position, a principled position, on the greatest constitutional crisis faced in these islands since 1921. And again, I'll go back to it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, pick up the Modern History of Ireland, found in the library of the House of Commons. I actually seem to be the only person who's ever read it since it was brought into the library in the 1960s. Now, I have to say, I could not blame my constituents in Western Bartonshire for coming to the necessary conclusion that the British government was incapable of running a menage, never mind the complexity of Brexit. It's a time in which the British Conservative and Unionist Party, and I have to say, has paraded its finest, like some alternate Easter parade, though there's not a lot of them here today, especially the Scottish Conservative members. And we have seen members on the benches opposite who actually found the Brexit referendum so difficult they didn't even participate in it. To a former minister who found it unbelievable that there had been at one point a hard border, a British border, in the Isle of Ireland. The lack of historical perspective is staggering, and the lack of political acumen is profound. The Prime Minister and I, Mr. Speaker, will not agree. We can both be assured of that on next week's vote. But at least I have to say the Prime Minister, like those of us on these benches, has been consistent in our opposing positions. And that cannot be said for those who brought us to this point. And I would describe them in that good old Scots term, sleek it, for off they went. And at the top of that list would be the former Right Honourable members for Whitney and also Tatton. Mr. Speaker, this is a Parliament they thought would take back control. And they've handed it, as they scurried off to build the huts in the backs of their gardens, they've handed it lock, stock and barrel to a bunch of free marketeer Brexiteers on the government benches. And also, would you believe, they would give it to the other end of the corridor, to the unelected, unaccountable, as I'm often said, bunch of warmers in the House of Lords. But that, we could have a flippancy about that comment. But how does it come about the archbishops and the bishops of the established Church of England should have a more of a say on Brexit than the elected parliaments of Scotland, Wales, and if it should sit, the Assembly of Northern Ireland? It is a profound reversal of the devolution story in this Parliament, which many members in this House participated in. To be brutally honest, Mr. Speaker, we in these benches are in no way surprised by this turn of events. The constitutional points, for example, the backstop, to which many members have talked about for Northern Ireland, it's a privileged position which these benches would be delighted with. I know some members from Northern Ireland are not, but I congratulate them on it. But it highlights the inability of the elected and sitting Parliament of Scotland, not just its government, but its Parliament, for having a voice in these deliberations, for they continue to be ignored. This constitutional conundrum is further muddied by the private expression of the Electoral Commission of the dubious donation of over £435,000 to the DUP, which may have come about from a shadowy group known as the Constitutional Research Council, headed by the former chair of the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, the very foundation of Brexit. Mr. Speaker, when I entered this House, I made it clear to you, for you were in the chair when I gave my maiden speech, my first speech, should I say, that I was neither a unionist nor a Home Ruler, and I'm not. I believe in the independence of the nation of Scotland. Yet, even as a Democrat in this House, I believe that the decision we take next week will be based on a false premise, funded by dark money, challenging the very idea of fair elections and any future referendums. Mr. Speaker, I'm no conspiracy theorist. I was there when my constituents voted for independence, and I was there when they voted to remain within the European Union. I saw the ballots being counted. Yet there are many members, including myself, because of the issue of dark money, members in this House who believe that the inability to investigate the involvement of dark money is not only an existential threat to democracy, but a real threat that weakens democratic consensus that has been built since 1945. Let me just conclude by saying, Mr. Speaker, to my constituents, you voted Remain. And many of them, Mr. Speaker, have asked me to be committed to a people's referendum. I will vote against the Government's motion next week, and if a referendum motion is brought to this House, I will fully support it, and I will campaign in my constituency for my country, Scotland, to remain within the European Union.